Say, whatever happened to the Common Core controversy? It sort of died down. I mean, it was a big thing there for a while, and this doesn't affect just parents and students and teachers. It affects the whole country, and it's all part, some argue, of the Saul Alinsky plan, to take over the country, take over the health care, take over the education, blah, blah. We won't have to go there. We do have Dr. Ralph Kerr with us today, former supervising principal, I think is the title at Arkport, but he went on to many other places, and now he's a professor, or associate professor, lecturer, we'll find out which, at Houghton College, but certainly an expert on education. Stay tuned. Okay, Ralph Kerr, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, what are you there at Houghton? Are you a lecturer, a professor? What's your title up there?
Well, I'm actually an adjunct professor at the college, and then I'm continuing to be the president of the Teaching and Learning Institute, where we're trying to recruit good people to consider running for their local school board.
Okay, and let me see now. You said something else there that when I was talking to you the other day that I wanted to pursue, but let's go to Common Core. What do you think of Common Core? Now, I don't know how many states, but they want it to be the universal way that all American kids learn, what they learn. What's your view of that?
Well, I think there are about 46 states that have currently signed on to the Common Core. And overall, I think it's a great idea in that what the design is really to have children, regardless of their situation, to gather the same knowledge in 8th grade, whether they live in New York State or Texas or Oklahoma. And particularly with young people moving around with their parents as much as they do now, I think that's a really good thing. And I will say that the rollout of this, along with some other things that we're aware of in our country, has been anything but smooth. I think the basic premise behind the Common Core is a good one.
I'm surprised to hear you say that, Ralph, because I know you're a real conservative, and many conservatives believe that Common Core is a corrupting influence on the kids. Did I miss something there somewhere?
Well, not from what I said, no. I do think that there is a whole lot of misinformation, some myths, and in some cases some deliberate falsehoods that have been espoused by people who are anti the Common Core, along with the unions and others who just are doing whatever they can to delay this and to cause a ruckus over it, which, as you alluded to earlier, has been happening all across New York State, particularly over the last few months.
Well, Sheldon Silver, probably, if not the most powerful, certainly the second most powerful politician in New York, Speaker of the Assembly, whatever he says, the Assembly Democrats do. And he said we got to stop Common Core as it is now. And it was generally believed that since Silver only responds to financial gifts to the Democrat Party, that the unions, the teacher unions, must have gotten to him. Do you know anything about that?
Well, certainly there's no hiding the fact that the teachers' unions and administrators' unions have been very much opposed to the Common Core. And I think initially with some good reason. I mean, last fall, when the Core was actually rolled out, teachers were asked to be teaching things that there was not, the supplemental material had not been released yet by the state. So they were faced with day after day at the beginning of trying to teach material that they didn't know really what the state's expectations were. The unions also were really concerned about the fact that as part of this whole rollout, teachers were going to be held accountable for their performance. I really laughed at that one because I don't know many industries or businesses where the employees are not held accountable, but this is fairly new in education. And so the teachers' unions were really up in arms about it because They have a whole list of reasons why they think it's unfair that they should be held accountable. But that's changed some because as the early results have come out across the state of New York, it shows, in fact, that outside of New York City, 92% of all the teachers who were evaluated or held accountable were rated either effective or highly effective. So rather than the unions pushing as hard against it as they were, they now have backed off some, particularly as these materials that they were lacking have come into their hands more than they were earlier.
All right, Dr. Ralph Kerr is my guest today. Now, 92% of the teachers outside of the city, we understand that that's an entity unto its own, but 92% of the teachers outside the city were rated as highly efficient or efficient by whom? Who did that?
By the administrators or by their peers who are authorized to evaluate them.
All right, okay. Governor Cuomo this past week made it quite clear that he favors Common Core implementation, and I don't know whether he and Silver are apart on this. If they are, it will be interesting to watch because there's a question about who has the most power in Albany, Cuomo or Silver, but I would be betting that Cuomo does, given his title as governor. Have you any insights on that? I'm sorry, what's that?
I say if I were a betting man, that's where I'd put my money as well.
All right. Now, let's talk about the other thing you said at the beginning of the show. You're trying to get qualified people to run for school boards. Tell me about that.
Well, over my 20 years as a school superintendent, and what I found was there were places where school boards were really a good bunch of people to work with, and I can say that when I was in Arkport as a superintendent, that was the case for the whole 10 years I was there. There are other places, though, where school boards are not a pleasure to work with. Either people have their own agenda or a variety of reasons that the boards are really dysfunctional. And in fact, at one time, and I mentioned this in my book, The Sin of Apathy, 23% of the school districts in the whole state were considered dysfunctional by their superintendents. So I've been involved since I retired with trying to recruit, basically, people who are interested in trying to bring some just common sense to their school board that also have good Judeo-Christian ethics that they would bring to their role as a school board member as well, and consider running for their local board.
Well, how do you go about doing that? I mean, there you are in Houghton. It's a big state. How can you possibly get people all over the state to say, yeah, I think I'll run for the school board?
Well, for one thing, we're not trying to do it all over the state.
Uh-huh.
We actually have concentrated on 158 districts that are in western New York. And we monitor every one of those districts on an annual basis to see how many candidates they have running and how many vacancies they have. And one of the data points that we've discovered is that in almost 50% of the districts, there are the same number of candidates as there are openings.
Yeah.
So basically, if there are 2 openings, there are 2 candidates. Well, that doesn't give people any choice whatsoever. And so we're trying to be involved in those districts in just encouraging more people to consider running so that people in the community will have a choice rather than just have a vote for the 2 people, that are going to fill the 2 vacancies anyway.
Okay, Dr. Ralph Kerr, you said you have Western New York in your sights right now. Hornell, Canisteo, Arkport, Alpha-Nowman, Canastawega, are they part of that group?
They certainly are,
okay.
Yes. And all the way over to the western part of the state and then draw a line up through Rochester and west from there.
We're going to take a break, and when I get back with Dr. Ralph Kerr, the question will be, what about school boards made up of, and this is generally the case, relatives of teachers? In some cases, teachers in one district serving on the school board in another. In other words, is it too top-heavy in the school boards with people who are teachers or who have a direct relationship, financial and otherwise, with teachers? We'll be back in just a moment. talking with Dr. Ralph Kerr. And I must tell you, I was a little surprised that he's in favor of Common Core. Then we got talking about getting more people to run for school boards. And my question at the break was, and this isn't my criticism, but I've certainly heard it from enough people, that school boards are primarily made up in many, many districts, not just around here, many districts, of people who have, say, a relative teaching, a daughter, a wife. Sometimes they're teachers in one district and they're on the school board in another. And people say, well, wait a minute. Now, what you've got here is teachers supervising teachers as, in effect, their bosses on the school board, even though we know school boards are relatively limited when the state starts to push itself around. What about that, Ralph?
Well, I am very concerned about that, where you have a husband or wife of a teacher on the board, or, as you mentioned, where teachers are on a board in one district and then teach in another. It's very hard not to be conflicted in those situations, and it amazes me that there's very seldom that people that have that potential conflict will excuse themselves from voting, let's say, on the teacher's contract. I just think it's a tremendous conflict of interest. The other problem that happens is that, as you probably know, when districts are in negotiations, they look to see what's the contract from the district nearby, what did they settle for, or what do they settle for in the BOCES region. And if you've got teachers on the board in another district, then obviously probably the settlement is going to be very favorable towards the teachers, and then you take that and say, well, okay, they got a 3 or 4% in that district, then we should do that here as well. So I think it's really unfair to the public, and it is a major conflict of interest that is part of the reason why we're trying to encourage more people to run for school boards, so that if there is another option where the person is not directly connected with a teacher or a family of a teacher, that would give a better option, it seems to me, for the voters of the district.
Now, I mentioned this to a fine fellow, who happens to be on a school board and has relatives teaching in the same district. Don't try to guess which district it is, because it wouldn't be fair. It's true of a lot of districts around here. And he said to me, yeah, you don't understand how hard these people have to work nowadays. It's not like the old days where there's a lot of respect for teachers. They're taking a lot of abuse in the classroom and so forth. Well, of course, that's not the issue. I don't doubt that a lot of teachers do have a tough time. On the other hand, I'm not saying this. I'm telling you what other people are saying. If you did a poll in communities like Hornell, Castillo, Arkport, even Alfred Alman, and said, are teachers paid enough? They'd probably come back and say, oh, yes, and some wouldn't even go so far as to say they're overpaid. Well, now, whether that's true or not is not the point. The point is, should their relatives be setting the salary? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Or that their colleagues are setting the salary. So they're not directly impacted by the salary increase, but because they're teachers, they're increasing the salaries that people in other professions might not be willing to do. The other thing that I think you need to be aware of, and I'm sure you are, but others may not be, is that schools are probably the last place in government where health insurance costs are continuing to rise, and employees are not paying much more for those increases. In fact, still in many, many districts, veteran teachers are receiving almost 100% of their health insurance payments by the district. And as you know, that's a huge amount of money in addition to the salary and other benefits that teachers receive.
Well, as you know, I used to be a teacher, and I have no problems in saying that it's in many ways a very nice job. I mean, you have a lot of time off. In other ways, a very hard job, because you take a lot of abuse from the kids. Not when I was teaching, but I guess you do now. What about that abuse factor? I've heard some horror stories from teachers about kids Well, I mean, doing things that they just couldn't have done 40 years ago. Let's put it that way. Is that getting worse?
I mean, it used to be back in the day when you and I were in school that the big issues were, kids chewing gum and maybe taking too long in the bathroom or something like that.
Smoking in the john, Yeah,
now it's the verbal abuse.
Yeah.
But again, I believe that if there are lots of remedies for that. If the administration is supportive of the teachers, then they quickly just let the students know that kind of behavior is just unacceptable. And if necessary, then the parents have to get involved, and the teachers and the administrators just have to come together and set standards for behavior that they're not going to vary from, regardless of who the parents might be or what influence the parents might have. Because in addition to just teaching the academics, I'd like to think that schools are also teaching children how to behave in our society. And there are unfortunately times when the school needs to do that, when parents should really be doing it. But if they're not, then that does fall on the teachers. And I think that most teachers have strong morals themselves, and they're going to input that belief system to the children, which I think is a good thing.
Not all teachers have strong morals.
That's true. I said most.
Yeah, some of the teachers in the sex ed programs, you got to wonder about. I have no problem saying that. If people knew what some of these people are saying, they'd wonder, what's really going on with this guy or this woman. Let's go back to the issue of pay. You think they're paid enough, teachers?
I think they are. Yes. They have to get a master's degree within 5 years, but most districts would start out with, the pay is going to be in the $35,000 range, and because they're unionized, they get annual increases that are negotiated on their behalf. Their benefit package is very, very strong, and I think the retirement system, which in openness, I have to say I'm benefiting from right now, is one of the best, certainly in the state, maybe in the country. And so there are lots of pluses. And then, as you know, when teachers offer to coach or are advisors for clubs or anything like that, all of those are increases to their pay, which they can either take or leave. Mm-hmm. So I know it's hard work, but as you said, the vacations are pretty nice. The length of time that some teachers put in during the day is minimal. Again, I don't want to...
No, some of them work, 14-hour days. Yeah, no question. Right. Yeah.
But there are others who, check in 5 minutes before the children come and are gone 5 minutes after they leave.
Now, one final question, going back to what you said about the abuse. I've always had the impression that New York State Department of Education rulings make it virtually impossible for teachers to truly correct kids, that they can say pretty much what they want. Am I wrong about that? The kids, that is.
You are wrong about that, yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, yeah. Well, Ralph Kerr, almost said Ralph Wilson, thinking football. And I think one final thing, Ralph, you've gotten into the baseball business. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. We've purchased a franchise in the New York Collegiate Baseball League, which is the league that the Hornell Dodgers play in, and the Wellsville Nitros, and we're really excited about the opportunity to play in that league. It's a competitive league, as you know. I know that your station sponsors the Dodgers, and we're glad to be able to come over there and play with them this coming summer. We're looking forward to it a great deal.
Will it be called the Houghton team, or?
No, it's going to be. It's the name is the Genesee Rapids.
Genesee Rapids.
Rapids, and we'll be playing on the brand new Houghton's baseball stadium at Houghton College.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you then. Dr. Ralph Wilson, former superintendent at Arkport and other places, now an adjunct professor at Houghton College. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're very welcome, Kevin. Good to be with you.
Ralph is a very conservative guy. I must tell you, I was a little surprised when he told me he favors Common Core. I suppose that means we're going to have to do a show now on the other side of Common Core, but not right away. We have other things coming up. Now, stay tuned for more news and information. NBC News coming up next. Here on AM 1480 WLEA, where news comes first. Where news comes first. Where news comes first.